Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Voisen, the host of Inside Personal Growth. And joining me from New York is Angel Millar. And Angel, hopefully I said your last name correct. Is that right?
Yes, you did.
Good,
Perfect.
good. Angel has a new book out, and the book is called The Path of the Warrior Mystic, Being a Man in an Age of Chaos. And boy, have we had our chaos lately. I think an appropriate book to have out right now. Um, what I would like to do, Angel, is let the listeners know a little bit about you. Angel is a well-known lecturer on intuition, symbolism, and self-development, as well as an artist and student of the martial arts. Um, he is the author of several books, including the three stages of initiatic. I always want to get that right.
Yes.
Okay. Spirituality. And he lives in New York. And you can find out more about Angel by just going to his website. It's angelmillar.com. And that's Millar. And there you will see more about his books, about him, about what he's doing. And it's a pleasure having you on the show because you write a lot about, I'm going to call it history in this book. And you get into a lot of characters that some of the people listening today, even though who follow spirituality, may or may not know. My sense is that you're very deep in this area, and I think that's a good thing because it pushes people's opportunity to explore not just their intellect but their spirituality. And
Right.
if you would tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and why your personal focus on wanting men to find the path to this warrior mystic. I've had other gentlemen on here speaking about masculinity recently in today's world and how it's so confused for guys.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, very much so. Well, to go into my background first, I became interested in spirituality a little bit when I was around the age of 15, so that was quite young. And I bought a book on astral projection, tried it, didn't really understand it entirely. But when I was 17, I came across a kind of new age neo-pagan shop that I became very involved with, spending days there and reading a lot, practicing different types of meditations. And later on, I became involved with some more kind of esoteric organizations. But really about the age of 20, I'd become a little bit disillusioned with much of what I had seen. By that point, I was at art college. I'd also taken up, I began to take up Kung Fu, Shaolin Kung Fu. And so in a way, this book is a little bit of a reflection, not only of the tradition of classical civilizations in regard to manhood, but also of my own journey, which is one of sort of having this sort of masculine and feminine. So on the one hand, fine art, and on the other hand, martial arts. And
where did the Freemasonry part come in? It's interesting. You mentioned Western mystery school as a cult.
Yeah.
And, I did a little bit digging, and my wife, Lisa, is the head of a Western mystery school called Builders of the Atom.
Oh, right.
OTA.
Yeah.
Paul Foster Case and Ann Davies and so on. And I have been married to her for 43 years, and she's been in all of those 43 years. She started when she was very young.
Wow.
And it's interesting because I was trying to kind of make the connection between Freemasonry. I know the BOTA, they actually meet at Masons buildings. They have their chapter meetings there. So how did that come to play for you?
Yeah. So I believe regarding the BOTA, I believe Paul Foster Case was a Freemason. I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Like many sort of spiritual authorities of that time, such as Manly P.O. as well. Freemasonry was something that I had been interested in again from a very young age. And I grew up in England. I now live in the US, but I grew up in England, and at that time, Freemasonry was still very well known, although most people would say, "Oh, Freemasons, they're kind of corrupt politicians and businessmen." It all sounded terribly dreary, and then later on, I was told that they practice ceremonial magic when I was in my teens, which sounded a lot more exciting. I didn't especially believe it, but around the age of probably 18, I managed to get a hold of used copies of a couple of Masonic rituals, the Rose Croix, which was obviously influenced by Rosicrucianism,
Right.
And alchemy and Hermeticism. I could tell that much. And also the Royal Arch, which is also in Great Britain influenced by Plato's idea of the elements,
Yes.
the 4 or 5 elements, depending how you look at it. And it seemed to be highly intelligent. Again, I wasn't entirely able to make out everything that it was saying, but it sort of piqued my interest. And then when I moved to the US, I would have been around the age of 29. I went into the Masonic Lodge in New York and asked if I could become a Freemason. And then I think it was literally a year later that I became a member. And it sort of opened my eyes quite a lot. And in one way, it opened my eyes because I felt like it was stepping back in time about 300 years. You could kind of get a different feeling of history, but it also made a lot of sense regarding the various sort of Western mystery traditions, orders that are out there, like the VOTA or the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Why is Freemasonry and why is Freemasonry just for men?
Well, it's a complicated subject.
Well, that's okay. Maybe I should not take you down that path because we want to get in your book. But
no, it's fine. No,
it's interesting because you don't see any female figures in Freemasonry.
Yeah. Well, so it's complicated in this sense. So the quote unquote regular Freemasonry, which is the biggest one in America and Great Britain, they have organizations for women, or the women can join, such as the Order of the Eastern Star. So women can get involved in a Masonic society, as it were, and they have rituals as well, which are very much related to Freemasonry. So there is that available for women. And there are other groups like the Rainbow Girls. I'm not sure what they are, and other organizations. But there are also women only Masonic lodges. Not very many of them. There's one in Washington D.C., which is recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England, and so women can join. They're just very obscure and a little hard to find in comparison. They tend not to have their own buildings. You can't just walk into one. So there are actually women Freemasons, and I think there have been women Freemasons for several hundred years. But not as many.
One of the things we talked about is the kind of this division between the masculine and feminine, and that man is divided creature. He compartmentalizes his life, thinking of behaving one way at home, another at work, another with friends. And I'd say this is true. How would you recommend that integrating these different parts of our personality become part of who we are as men in today's world? We live in a chaotic world. Let's face it. We live in a world where it's hard for people to find their identity. We see so much occurring in that way. And I think it's not good for the mental health of a man or a female, for that matter.
No,
but in particular for men.
No.
Men. Yeah. So what would you recommend, or to help people integrate all those elements of their personality?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you have to have a focus and something you're aiming towards, because this will at least sort of allow you to not take on board every single fleeting desire that comes along, and you can focus on some of them or one of them rather than every little thing that enters your mind. So having a focus is definitely a good idea. Personally, I'm sure we'll come back to this as well. I recommend practicing some kind of hard art and some kind of soft art. So whether, martial arts or weightlifting or something that's strenuous and is going to push you physically, but something where you can, I don't want to say express yourself, although that's part of it, but you can express yourself in martial arts as well. But something where you can kind of appreciate beauty, appreciate the feminine, and appreciate this sort of the more civilized aspects of life and of nature as well, perhaps you could say.
Interesting. And you speak about the atomization of modern society combined with cheap and immediate accessibility to entertainment via radio, TV, the internet. And it's all made it easy for individuals to avoid becoming part of a group that meets in the physical world.
Yeah.
And, it's just like you and I right now, we're meeting over Zoom. But also to take pride in not being a joiner. It's kind of like, oh, well, I'm not joining that group.
Right.
Why, in your estimation, is it so important in our world today for people to meet in groups? And how does this help men looking to express masculinity and feminine sides of themselves? It's interesting in these orders like Freemasonry. What have they been doing? I'm wondering during the pandemic, if people are not meeting, because so many people aren't meeting these days.
Yeah.
They're just not. They're not coming together.
Right. Yeah. No, they're not coming together. I mean, they were putting more education online, so lots of lectures, but that doesn't really compensate for meeting in person. And I should say that I actually heard one prominent Freemason on YouTube, I think it was, saying that he actually preferred the sort of education online and not going physically to a lodge. And I think that's kind of a tragedy. And statistically, if you go back to the 1970s, I think two-thirds of America, and I believe it was, were still involved with clubs and going to regular club meetings, whatever it may have been. And then from 1985 to 1994, there was a 45% drop in club attendance. And of course, you can find this as well in many kind of churches or religious institutions. And so we've really become people, a century ago, we would have been involved with a club, a church or a synagogue or some other religious institution, and maybe even some kind of trade guild as well, or some trade society. And so we would have had this huge network around us, as well as our friends and family who all would have lived around us as well. But today we're more and more isolated, more and more cut off. And people have now take pride in this idea that they're not a joiner, as if joining something is a bad thing. And of course, I would say that, okay, you shouldn't be a joiner, you should be a contributor, because the more you contribute, the more you get back, the more, more enjoyable anything is, but you also kind of learn about yourself at the same time. And as to the benefits of joining or being involved with like-minded groups, I think there are many. One of them is to have a support network to some degree, definitely, and certainly in this very unstable world, we need some kind of support network. And I know that, for example, the people who have the fewest contacts have earn the least money, and the people with most contacts and the highest quality contacts earn the most money. So we do need some kind of network just to navigate this strange world that we live in. But I would say more than that today, another really good reason for being involved with groups or clubs or whatever it may be is that you will meet people from different walks of life, people who have different ideas and life experiences to you. And, the internet was sold to us as creating a global village. And now everybody says it's created a globe of different villages. We're all kind of isolated in our own echo chambers. And, if you meet someone that you probably wouldn't friend online in real life, you're going to get a different life perspective. And there's too much in our time of people thinking that anyone who thinks differently to me is evil or a bad person. And, you know, at least you can see that, no, you know, people have their own problems. They're not out there being malicious most of the time, or they have their own life experiences, and you can kind of get a different read on society and people and life. And it's going to expand your mind and make you a little bit more compassionate towards other people as well, I think. That can only be a good thing.
No, I agree with the fact that, you know, these Zoom calls or Zoom meetings, and I have to be, you know, obviously the podcast is one way to disseminate lots of information on books, right? I've done almost 900 interviews now over 14 years.
Yeah.
So in one respect, it's very rewarding. In another respect, I only meet about 10% of the authors physically.
Right. Yeah.
To sit down and have coffee, or really, you know, learn about them, or become friends with them, or do something more than just an interview. And I honor what you're saying, because it is so true. We are more isolated today than ever. COVID helped to exacerbate that isolation. And it's not a good thing to have that. And, you know, you state that it's through the body that we express our true self, and that our physical body is the alchemy laboratory in which we can test and experiment. Speak with us about the importance of this expression, as well as how our society today focus so much on the intellect. You know, you look at everything. You know, I get 3 books a week in here from authors, and you go, well, is there another author going to write another book? You know, and it's about this, and a lot of times it's about the same stuff. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that if you look at the 200 million titles or whatever they are at Amazon, whatever the number is, it's huge. You can find a book on anything, just about. And it is expanding the intellect, but how is it helping us get to our true self? That's the question, because you're saying the physical, just like you said a minute ago, do some weights, do some martial arts, express yourself in this mannerism. You know, when you look at mind, body, spirit connection, you're certainly looking at, when I say the arts, I'm going to use yoga as well. You may practice martial arts, but a lot of people use yoga and meditation as a way to make a connection to a higher power, whatever that is, God, Buddha, whoever you want to call it. But the point is, here you're saying this expression of the true self. I'd love to get your opinion here. You still there?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, yes, I am. You froze a little bit, but it's okay. I can hear you now. But yeah, so one thing that it definitely is happening today, that we're becoming very much stuck in our own intellects. And I wouldn't even say mind, it's really the intellect that we're stuck in. And we sort of criticize everything, discern, take in information, and the information is often very skewed as well. And they become very impassioned about information and say that we have the correct information, and anyone who doesn't is an evil monster, and they don't understand the information that we have. And it becomes this sort of very a cantankerous relationship with other people in the world. And, you know, and I'll speak for myself, you know, I studied fine art in England, which is a very, and design and fashion is a very feminine world. And I found that when I was practicing martial arts and working out, I was actually a lot nicer person, because I was able to kind of express some aggression and maybe not be as interested in all this craziness as well. And I found that, you know, when I wasn't doing that, there would be a lot more in me. And we think of aggression as physical, but the world today, so many people are intellectually aggressive, and they are intending to hurt people or to cause damage to other people through what they say. And they, you know, would think of themselves as very nice people, but actually they're hurting themselves and hurting other people, and they're too much in their intellect. We are a body. I mean, we're a mind as well, but we're a body. And if you neglect your body, if you don't train it the way you cultivate your mind, things start to go horribly wrong. And you think about when you get sick, how that affects your mind. You can't concentrate, you can't focus, you don't want to do anything. And people neglect their bodies thinking that their mind must be running perfectly well. But actually, it is affecting their thinking. They just don't realize it because they're so used to their body being unhealthy. And I forget, it's an extremely high percentage of people in America that are on prescription drugs in any 1 month. I think it's almost 50%. And there is no way a population should have almost 50% on prescription drugs at any one time. So we do need to, get healthy, and, weightlifting, martial arts, it doesn't have to be that. It could be dance as well. It could be yoga, as you mentioned. These
Could
are
be
all
breath,
good things. We
could
really
be
want to
breath
cultivate
work.
our bodies, just as we want to cultivate our mind as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to do it, and I totally concur with you that there needs to be a way for people to express themselves that way. So, Angel, in your chapter on the necessary work, you speak about the contrast, which I thought was interesting, between Ayn Rand and the teachings of Zen Buddhism. You state that ultimately we are supra-rational, and we find meaning in the body, in the landscape, in sex, in love, in spirituality, ritual, family, brotherhood, friendship, and so on. In our modern world, how would you classify the warrior mystic, and what do we have to do to give ourselves permission to express ourselves in this way?
Yeah, so in regards to the warrior mystic, if you look back through many different civilizations, you find that the sort of elite warriors were trained not only in a martial art and in physical expertise for battle, but were also trained in or taught the softer arts such as painting, calligraphy, um, tea ceremony, and so on, depending on the culture. And many of these figures were quite bloodthirsty because they were warriors. Miyamoto Musashi, for example, Japan's most famous samurai, is also renowned for his calligraphy, his landscape gardening, and painting. In the West, you have a figure such as the Viking Egil Skallagrimsson, who was also a Norse poet, and the first poet to actually use rhyme at the end of each line rather than at the beginning. But and so you have this sort of contrast that is brought together in a single individual. And today in our civilization, we are encouraged very much to specialize and to find a niche and a niche within a niche, so that we have a sort of captive audience in some kind of particular area, especially within our profession, so that we can be an expert in some minuscule area. And in our private lives, of course, we're also encouraged to be one type of person. And it really doesn't matter if you are from a sort of working class background where you're expected to get a working class job, or if you're middle class or upper class. There are expectations for you to succeed perhaps in some areas, but expectations for you to not go into some areas and not to do certain things. And that really cuts across the board. And, if a guy might be expected to be tough, but he will not be expected to practice an art, or vice versa. And I would say that as we move into a more and more unstable future, and a few other people began saying this, that we're going to need to be much more of a generalist than specialist.
Yeah,
we need to be
I would say,
adaptable.
right. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I think people have to have much more of a generalist mind frame, mindset to function in this upcoming world. Yep.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Oh, it is interesting because you had a chapter on from obstacle to accomplishment. And you state that every field has its experts. That's what we were just talking about. But expertise and technical knowledge is not wisdom. Counterintuitively, you said, perhaps mastery of the art first requires one to be totally mastered by it, meaning the art. How do we overcome the obstacles to become more of ourselves and to express our true selves instead of being trapped in a world which is probably calling for people to be experts in a certain field versus having this, as the warrior did, this variety? He was a painter. He worked with his body. He had all these other things that he could do, right?
Yes.
And yet we haven't called on that. Our colleges today actually are asking people to focus on one thing. And I think that the educational system, while it is great in what it does and the kind of people that we have coming out of colleges, it doesn't help people be more of a generalist.
No, that's right. If you go to the very top colleges in the USA, they don't want you to have a good education or a good, score in education across the board. They want you to be extremely good at one particular thing, and if you're not good at other things, it doesn't matter. But yeah, so there are a couple of things to say there, and one is, we all face obstacles in our life, and some worse than others, perhaps. But there's an idea today that, for example, Malcolm Gladwell says that really it's where you are born and when you are born that determines whether you will succeed or not. Noticeably, you can't reverse engineer this. But so he would say that, for example, Steve Jobs happened to be born in the right year and was living around Silicon Valley at the right time. And if he'd been 10 years early or 10 years late, it wouldn't have happened. That is true. But what made Steve Jobs kind of revolutionary was that, he introduced, different fonts to the computer. It all looked like a calculator before that. And the reason he did that was he studied under a Trappist monk learning calligraphy. Well, there is no way on earth that you could say that that would be likely or that he would be in the right time and place to learn calligraphy under a Trappist monk, yet he was able to use that and revolutionize computing. And if you look at many of the most famous people, certainly most of the innovators in different fields, they had horrible childhoods. Many of them nearly died or had deaths in the family or disease, extreme poverty. And it was really going through and experiencing these obstacles that enabled them to push themselves forward in life and to become something. And today we're not only told to specialize, we're told that we must protect ourselves, and if we experience some obstacle, it's very unfair. Whereas, that was really what was propelling people. The artist Edvard Munch, best known for his painting The Scream, had deaths in his family, his mother and sister, all kinds of poverty, a horrible childhood. And he said later on that was his rudder. That's what gave him direction in life, and without it, he would be rudderless. And so I think we want to be very careful about thinking that, if we're born in the right place and time, or if we have all the benefits, or if we have all the luck and the privilege that's going to make us. Usually that just cripples people. Those people can become experts, but they never become innovators.
So that's a very important point you make. I mean, Steve Jobs is a great example. I happen to be reading a book that a gentleman wrote, Ken Rusk, and it's called Blue Collar Cash. And the interesting thing was that, we have people that work in the trades. Our world has kind of moved. We don't have enough truck drivers. We don't have enough people to do plumbing. We don't have enough people to take these roles. Yet college has said, hey, if you take these roles, you're going to make more money. But the reality is that's not true anymore.
No,
the truck driver
it's
is
not.
making as much as the well-educated person who came out and is a middle manager. And
Yeah.
those roles and positions require that they become a lot more versed and use their hands. And he said
Yeah.
there was an interesting thing, Angel. He said there's
Yeah.
this step back moment. And I thought that was interesting because
Mm.
when you create something with your hands, like you're a landscaper or an architect
Mm-hmm.
or you're a plumber and you fix something, or you build a house or you build a wall and you're a mason, and you take the step back moment and you see what you created, there's a tremendous reward in that,
Yes.
versus all these people that are working on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a big difference. I thought that was a great statement that he made. And you state that we're trapped in our, that we do what we want to do, eat what we want to eat, buy what we want to buy, and believe in what we want to believe. How do we move beyond the psyches and that we're trapped in by them and start to ask the difficult questions about how to live our lives?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to question what we know, and I don't mean this in some kind of self-flagellating sense, but if you read the news and something shocks you, read the news from the opposite side's perspective, and usually you'll find that they have a different perspective. Some facts may be left out, some facts may be distorted, and at least that way you can begin to realize, like, oh, okay, there really are two sides to every story. And I would say approach life a bit like that. There's always something more we can learn. We don't have to have an allegiance to one particular side. And we should always be trying to go beyond what we know, really pushing ourselves. And so, yeah, I think, if you can study things that you haven't been exposed to before, if you can meet different people with different perspectives, and really try to learn and try to listen to people and let them speak and try to understand where they're coming from, or understand different arts, as it were, then you're going to be opened up to a different understanding of life that's more complex and nuanced and a little more forgiving and a little more creative as well. You'll be able to come up with creative solutions yourself as well, which is what we need.
Yeah. And, it's almost like when you look at that perspective, you look at it from, I remember Margaret Wheatley used to talk about ecosystems. And, it's all these ecosystems that are out there, they're all interdependent. And I think that's
Yes.
what you're really saying, is the interdependence that we have and the ability to
Right.
operate within that, not our independence, but our interdependence. And
Yeah.
Angel, in your chapter on fear and the higher self, you state that in our world today, estranged from nature and with a belief in science and faith in politics, many people in the West find it almost impossible to accept that life is inherently chaotic, unsafe, and often unfair, or that brutality can invade at any time, or that we will be treated unjustly. What are some of the ways to embrace what is happening in our world, yet access the spiritual nature of life and transmute our beliefs to live from our true self, as you call it?
Yeah. It's very difficult for people in the West, obviously, at least of a certain income level, to realize that, life is brutal and unfair. And for much of the world, obviously, it's not like that. And for many poorer people in America or the West, it's also not like that. It's much more chaotic. And I think, in a way, we've seen that, especially over the last year or so with COVID, which has been, in my opinion, largely a kind of financial divide, with people who are middle class and who can work from home saying, we all need to extend the lockdowns, and people that are living right on the edge and really need to do something physical like cleaning or driving a truck or whatever it may be, to make enough money to pay their rent, saying, no, we've had enough of the lockdowns. And we live in a strange and divided world. But in regards to understanding that life is chaos and it could all change very rapidly, especially I think the way things may be going, I would say that in a sense we just have to face that our civilization today is unusual. It's not been like this until very recently. Think of the world wars of the 20th century. On the first day of the Battle of the Somme, there were 20,000 deaths on the British side alone and 40,000 casualties on the British side. And, that sort of mayhem may be relatively unusual. We saw 2 great wars in the last century, many others as well. And civilizations and countries can be wiped out very quickly. And I think, we don't want to be morbid or paranoid about what may be, but I would say that we should prepare ourselves as a whole, prepare ourselves to be adaptable for the future, to make sure we're healthy, to make sure that we have enough stamina and willpower to go into the future and make changes in our lives, or be adaptable and seize opportunities as they come, and not be a passive victim.
Yeah, you speak about the ways things can change and how chaotic it is, and that it is fragile. People don't look at it as being that fragile, but on the other hand, the wars that are being fought, even though may not be physical, are emotional wars. And also, when you look at our cyber world, it's the war in the cyber world that's creating the division, the divisiveness amongst us as individuals, to question so many different things and to try and look at things in a different way. And, between AI, artificial intelligence, having its effect on, how we do our purchases and how these things appear, thus the problems that we're seeing at Facebook, I honestly, it's going to get worse for Facebook before it ever gets better. And it is a challenge. I mean, do you want to comment about on that war? Because there is a war being fought in our cyberspace.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah, but I think, this war between different groups is often kind of, it's almost, it's a very passionate and angry, intense and destructive war. That is extremely true. But it is because people look at the other side or other people as not really quite human. And, I've even seen people make comments absolutely to that effect, that people who don't agree with such and such a person on vaccines, let's say, are simulacra of human beings or excuses of human beings. They're not actual people. And it's very destructive, not only for society, but for our own conscience and our own soul, when we refuse to look at people as actual people with their own lives and their own problems and their own aspirations as well. And I think that we really do need to get back to the point where we can meet different people and see that they are human beings. And being online all the time is one of those things that makes us think that other people are exactly how they've been portrayed in the media or by the most angry social media posters out there, and it's not really the case. People really need to take a step back, realize that the people they're angry at are human beings just like them, and hopefully you can meet them at some point, or people like them and understand that.
Yeah, it's definitely a world where we're seeing chaos and wars being fought over the internet. And that is escalating into physical stuff, which is then manifesting itself out in the world, which you were talking about earlier, the anger. The anger that individuals have toward other individuals has been exacerbated by this problem. And, you state that society tries to protect itself from nature and from chaos, yet they intervene. And then if you would speak with us about, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Gwen and the Green Knight, and the
Oh, yeah.
representation of the five-pointed star, a sign invented by King Solomon. I know because of my wife's work in
Yeah.
Hebrew, and you look at what BOTA was done, everything's around a five-pointed star.
Right.
So speak with us a little bit about that, because it's on the cover of your book as well.
Yes. Yeah. So in regard to the five-pointed star in Gwen and the Green Knight, which is a Middle English myth, and in the myth, I don't know if there's actually a movie out now. I don't know if you've seen it. I haven't seen it yet, but in the original myth, King Arthur's court are celebrating Christmas when a mysterious giant green knight enters the hall and makes this challenge and says, I'll give anyone my axe who wants to chop off my head on condition that I can do the same to them next year. And everyone there, including the knights, are a little bit nervous about this, but Gwen, one of the knights, steps up and says that he will allow that. And so he chops off the Green Knight's head. The Green Knight puts his head back on and tells him to seek him out
Interesting. Yeah.
a year from now. And so he spends this entire year on a kind of pilgrimage towards his own death, as he would perceive it. But before he sets out, he's given armor and a shield, and on the shield is a pentagram. And it has different meanings. So one is, refers to the four fingers and the thumb, refers to the five senses, to fellowship, generosity, courtesy, compassion, and purity, and also to the five wounds of Christ. And today, of course, we would think of the pentagram as a satanic symbol. If you watch Hollywood movies or in witchcraft, it shows up there, but it has a long and very complicated history. In architecture, it embodies the golden ratio as well, which is, the perfect number that you find embodied in classical architecture. And you also even find it in Freemasonry early on.
It's interesting how it's been distorted, and the beliefs around it. I think my wife speaks about the Golden Dawn, and
right.
So
That's right.
You look at this and a five-pointed star, and what you just said had so much meaning in comparison to how people misinterpreted it and misinterpret so many different things, right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think they need to be a little bit more educated about really what the true meaning and significance was, and it requires them to go back into history and really look at history, not current day.
Right.
So, Angel, if you were to leave our listeners with three important points from your book, and what would they be, and what is the importance of having them living their lives as this higher men in a modern world today?
Yeah. So the 3 points, I would say: develop your mind, body, and spirit. We're whole people. We're not just an intellect. We're also our body. We're also creative people. We need to develop ourselves as a whole. Secondly, I would say, try to give up criticism. There's criticism online, media. We're constantly assaulted by a criticism, whether it's aimed at us personally or at people in general or some political side or whatever it may be. It's very destructive for our spirit and our consciousness. Give up criticism and become a creator instead.
I like that.
The mystic G.I. Gurdjieff said that we will give up our happiness before we will give up our suffering. And I think it's weirdly true that, a lot of the people who are online attacking other people actually are living perfectly comfortable lives. But they rather than give up their suffering, they give up their happiness to suffer. It's a very strange human thing, but we have to make a concerted effort to give up criticizing, give up feeling angry, and be creative. And
Very important
thirdly,
points. And what's the
yes,
third
I
one?
think so. Yeah, I would say that realize that although, you mentioned Ayn Rand earlier on, who says we should be rational producers. I would say that realize we're mostly non-rational. In the medieval period, they had the idea that there was intellectus and ratio meant rational thought, which was kind of like the workhorse of the mind. If you needed to figure out a solution to a problem, you would use ratio or rational thinking.
Right.
But there was also intellectus, which meant contemplation. So if you contemplated nature or you contemplated the sky or a flower, they believed that you were actually contemplating the nature of God, or you were contemplating something divine, and you were absorbing it in a sense from the divine, that there was this other way to perceive the world. And I think today we could say that not only do we have, rational thinking, mostly we're rationalizing, but let's say we have the potential to think rationally, the potential to contemplate, but we're also moving through different states of consciousness throughout our day. Sleep, into hypnopompia, the state between sleep and waking, maybe meditation, daydreaming, contemplating aesthetics, and so on. And so we go through these different states of consciousness, or flow if you're practicing, say, martial art or dance or yoga or maybe something else. And not to get stuck in the idea that we're rational, because we're largely not rational. And that's why, of course, as a tangent, that's why advertising doesn't speak to us rationally. It shows us images of happy people, bright colors, and so on to motivate us, because we're not really motivated by rational thinking. So I would say, realize we're not really entirely rational. Cultivate the non-rational, whether that's practicing an art, the body, of course, health, going out into nature, and recognize that we're passing through these different states of consciousness throughout the day, sleep, hypnopompia, daydreaming, and make those work for you. They all have a purpose. We're multidimensional people, and
Right.
we really want to grasp that multidimensional nature that we have, and not reduce our own selves down to a cliche, I would say. In regard to living as the higher man, which I think you can tell I regard as really developing our whole selves. And of course, I understand that many people probably don't want to practice martial arts, but if you can make your body a little stronger, even if it's, say, through dance or through working out, that's going to be a big plus. Practice some kind of art, calligraphy, painting, some kind of design, whatever it may be, or creating, redoing cars or something, whatever it may be, whatever is your thing, and cultivate the intellect as well, understand culture, and you develop ourselves as a whole beyond the cliches that people want us to be, because maybe they're afraid that we're going to be out of their control. Develop ourselves as a whole. And I think it's important to have this sort of classical reference. You find this type of figure throughout history, to really realize that we're not at the end of the time. This isn't the perfect world, and we're not going to make the perfect world probably. But this is another period of time, and what we believe now, we won't believe in 20, 30, 40 years from now. It keeps changing, and we need to be able to navigate that while really not selling our soul in the process, and really encountering this kind of chaos and enabling that to make us stronger, or becoming stronger through interacting with it, not giving into it.
Yeah, you bring up some very important points there that I think, as a conclusion to our interview and to our listeners knowing more about your book, I think that becoming the man that you want to become in the age of chaos requires what Angel just said. And it also requires a bit of courage, because you will have to muster up that courage to do that, and a willingness to stretch yourself. He's talking about stretching from a standpoint of the body, but I'm talking about stretch your intellect, stretch your body, stretch everything, thereby becoming more of a higher let's just call it a whole person. And Angel, I'm going to direct the listeners to go to your website. Again, it's Angel Millar, and that's ANGEL MILLAR. There you can learn more about Angel, his prior books as well. We'll put links to those books on this blog. This book, The Path of the Warrior Mystic, Being a Man in the Age of Chaos. If you want to learn more about that, that will also be at the website. Angel, thanks for being on Inside Personal Growth and sharing some of your insights and wisdom about what it's going to be like to become this, I'm going to just call it, whole higher person in today's chaotic world.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'm really glad you invited me on.